like 4 like sub 3-hour marathons in a row, or I can't remember how many or what the 5K time is. There's like, it's like 31 5Ks at some time.
That's 4 sub 3-hour marathons in a row.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so crazy. That's so fast. And are you still eating mostly meat?
So, this gets brought up quite a bit, I think, because, I mean, I eat a ton of animal products for sure. But I wouldn't classify myself as a quote-unquote carnivore or quite in that.
Well, this is because the carnivore diet people want to claim you.
Right.
And we discussed this kind of the last time you were here, where you take in a lot of glucose and you ramp up your carbohydrates considerably before a race. But like, what is a daily diet? Let's say in training, like you're preparing for something like this. What's a daily diet for you like?
Yeah. So, let's jump into that. I think there is some nuance within that even, because when you think of my lifestyle, the way I like to describe it is if you took a calendar year and you grabbed a single day out of there and you grabbed a day where I was at like a peak training day versus a recovery day, those are like so drastically different in terms of my energy and my energy demands. So like things tend to fluctuate quite a bit and change quite a bit. And I think that's oftentimes what confuses people, because they look at what I'm doing, say, on race day, or they look at what I'm doing on one of my big workout days or my rest day and think that's what I'm doing across the board. So when you get the folks saying, oh, well, Zach follows a carnivore diet, they're probably looking at like a post-race recovery day where then I might be eating almost all just animal products, a lot of eggs, a lot of salmon, red meat, that sort of stuff. But if you pick a day out where I'm doing like a big training day, doing like a 30-mile run or something like that, that's where I'm going to kind of bring back some of the carbohydrates to try to supplement that activity. And the best way to maybe describe it is, there's like this like kind of train low, race high, or this carb periodization concept that's getting more momentum behind it and more studies and science behind it too. There's some interesting folks that are looking into this in more detail. And if folks are really interested in doing a deep dive in it, there's a guy named Dr. Mark Bubbs. He wrote a book called Peak, and he kind of dives into kind of like some of the nutrition science, where it's been and kind of where it's kind of heading, and they highlight some of that. And one of the big things they're starting to recognize that even with the elite athletes, when you're periodizing your training like I do, your nutrition should be being periodized as well. The science is pretty clear that like if you're doing a workout and you take in glucose or fructose, I think most science says a 2-to-1 ratio is ideal for maximizing the amount you can take in. Then you're going to give yourself an advantage. That's like rocket fuel. So then it becomes a question of like, do you need that 100% of the time, or do you even want to do it 100% of the time? Because when we look at elite,
can I pause you right here?
Yeah.
When you say glucose 2-to-1, like what do you mean by that? And
glucose to fructose.
Okay.
Because what they found out is when they started doing a lot of like the exercise science and nutrition was that the real limiter is your gut. So like on paper.
So absorption?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a finite amount you can absorb, and you increase the amount you can absorb on average if you have that 2-to-1 ratio versus all of one or the other.
So 2 glucose to 1 sucrose?
Yeah.
Interesting. And now what are the different sources for glucose versus sucrose? Like sucrose is simple sugar that you get. Is that more like a refined sugar?
Yeah. I think like the way like most like sports supplements and things like that are going to be designed to kind of meet those specific, because they're looking at the literature and they're seeing like, okay, this is how you optimize
so like a Powerade or a Gatorade or something like that would be a 2-to-1?
Yeah, I'd have to look to see exactly if they have that, but my guess would be they would be if they're looking at the research and where that's kind of at. But yeah, so like really the question that I think needs to be asked with a lot of this stuff is like, if I want to make a workout feel as easy as possible, if I can get in like say 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour, it's probably going to do that. Like my perceived effort at that pace is probably going to feel easier. But then you have to ask the question, like, how often do you need it to feel that easy? So for me, the answer to that is like, well, if I'm doing something really strenuous or something that's in a little bit of a gray area where it's just fast enough to dip into the glycogen stores, but just slow enough that I can do it for quite a while, like maybe even a couple hours, then you're kind of in this area where that could be an advantage for me from a performance standpoint. But if I'm going out for an easy run of like 60 to 90 minutes and it's going to be like a 2 to 3 out of 10 perceived effort anyway, like there's no real need for me to be hitting glucose during that or, sports drink during that to make that feel even easier yet. Because my goal isn't necessarily to, make an easy run feel even easier, I guess is the way to
It's
maybe
hilarious.
describe
So you
it.
call a 90-minute run easy. Nothing, just a stroll, just a few dozen miles.
Well, and I think that also brings up a really good point too, where like a lot of this stuff when we're looking at carbohydrate usage and performance is we're looking at elite athletes. We're looking at folks that are training for like, the Olympics. Sometimes they're even Olympic medalists. And that's just not a very good comparison, I think, to the average person who's out there running because, their purposes are different. Their objectives are different. Their lives are very different. Like one is doing basically everything around a specific date and distance and trying to run as fast as they can on that date. And another person may be trying to run as fast as they can, but there's so many other factors in life like their work, their relationships, their the level of training they're actually able to have with the time they have, and then also like managing their own health and nutrition, because like elite athletes don't have a very rosy picture in terms of long-term health either. So for someone who's like maybe 10, 20 pounds overweight and is trying to run to get into shape or train to get into shape or something like that, they're probably thinking just as much about health as they are about performance. So for them to be, shuttling in 60 grams of carbohydrate every hour during training and racing is probably not the direction that they'd want to go.